So pushing back on any vendor, forget software vendors. If you hire a landscaping company and when they show up for the first cut, they refuse to do grass cutting because they haven't seen that kind of grass before. That's something to push back on. You're not going to accept that. So why would you accept something lame excuses from anybody? Forget software providers. And that's what I mean by pushback. It's not a fight. It's essentially doing what's right for your organization and for you. And sometimes those sort of goals don't align between you and the vendor, and you have to push back. Um, on the question of getting blacklisted, again, large county, how many large counties are there in the US? Very few. And a provider that is is even talking about blacklisting a client, they should not be in this business. Okay, so um, really good question, but the industry is changing. Clients have more power now. Um, you can really take advantage of new tools like AI-enabled coding. Building your own products is coming back. So who's going to shortlist a large county? Again, those people should not be in this business if they're going to be in the business of blacklisting clients. Um, Comment from Eric Weintraub, UKG, from the firm. When expectations are set with the customer about their staffing commitment to a project, is there an effective way without assigning blame to rally the customer to support the project to the pre-agreed levels? Lack of support often leads to scope creep and delay. Yeah, and because projects take so long to implement, sometimes people forget the commitments that were made, and that's on both sides, right? So it's really important to have things like project charters and staffing plans and really go into an implementation knowing what, of course, what's at stake, but also um, what kind of resource requirements you're gonna have to make resource commitments as a client to the project, because you can leave it all to the vendors. That includes us, but it behooves you to have an executive team that is capable of making hard decisions that can go to war for this project. And I don't mean that lightly. This isn't something that you do on the side. Of course, you all have day jobs. This is why you need stellar A players on the steering committee. And again, all of this is in the ERP survival kit. I'll give you a bigger link here. Um, Transformation survival kit. Scan that code, which will take you to this free resource that has all of these goodies in there. If you need more information, you have more questions, please feel free to reach out. There's a link in there to get on my calendar directly for I think a 60-minute consultation. So take advantage of that, please. Thanks for the question, Eric. Kerry Boudreau, uh, Fort Square. Customers, clients can leverage length of contract to negotiate lower year-on-year increases, assuming you're going SaaS. Most software vendors want a 3 to 5% annual increase. Most will negotiate this. Yeah. These increases are negotiable. Your milestone payments are negotiable. How much you pay them up front is negotiable. So when that first contract comes to you, and I know Marcus Harris is on. Hi, Marcus. Um, uh, Great resource, by the way, if you want real in-depth contracting assistance. Um, but yeah, all of this is negotiable. All of this is to be talked about. When that first contract comes to you, don't just accept it. Tie it to what your goals are. Make sure that your scope of work and your RFP response from the vendor is part of that contract. So back to audience questions. Um, how early? This is again from the CIO. How early should consulting firms like yours be brought in? Before the RFP, during the vendor demos, or post selection? As early as possible. Look, if you're thinking of undertaking an ERP replacement, a transformation project 2 years from now, this is a good time for us to start talking. because we can give you resources, we can talk to you, we can point you to conferences and other firms that are doing this. um, Software providers will, we can tell you what's going on with other clients. Historical knowledge is going to be key as you proceed down this path. Not only that, it's a good time to start thinking about what an ERP transformation project is going to look like in 2 years. Are you going to do RFPs the same way? Are you going to do requirements the same way? Once again, I think customizing software is going to be um, cool again. It used to be a terrible word, and it still is if you're going to do it traditionally. But micro SaaS, plug and play web apps that really solve that problem for you is going to be critical. So, what does that mean for requirements definition? Everyone in our industry, third party consulting, other than us, is doing requirements definition the same way. You have 20-year-old requirements in there. You really need a software provider to tell you that they can cut checks or you can access their system on the web. Those are all defunct old requirements. The new way of doing business is outcomes based. How do you select your providers? How do you select software? Is based on outcomes, and you defining your outcomes is critical. So there's a lot of movement happening in the software industry because of AI, because of consolidation, because of clients needing different things, and you need to keep an eye on all of that. So if your ERP transformation is 2 years out, life is going to be very different 2 years from now. Selections are going to be done very differently. So yeah, as early as possible, as frequently as possible. We don't need to have a contract with us. We love having contracts with you, but if you have a question, we have so many channels available for you to reach out and um, get thinking about how you're going to do your project. And by the way, I'm gonna pop up the ERP guide. This is another great resource that we've come up with. Comprehensive guide to how do you even begin thinking about ERP transformation, because a lot of our clients are in the same boat. 20, 30 years ago, they either bought something or created something from scratch, and it's taken on a life of its own, right? Most of your processes are now running on Excel. And again, you're not alone. Um, it happens a lot. And so, how do you start? Where do you go next? It's in this report and the other one I shared. Next question is, I think this is from a chief HR officer. No, actually, this is from the CIO again. We've struggled to get finance and HR to agree on shared priorities during tech projects. How do you drive consensus across political and operational silos? Um, Consensus. That's tough. I think having shared goals, having the right leadership in place is really important. But think about this. This question is coming from a CIO for a county. Their job is to provide the tools necessary for each organization. And this reminds me of a story where we were working with a school district, pretty large school district, and the chief HR officer knew what they wanted, meaning they wanted to modernize their operations, reduce paper, and really, really, really streamline HR operations. They also knew which product they wanted to buy. And so they did not want to participate in an ERP process or an RFP process with finance. They wanted to do their own thing. But how does that work? Like, is that best of breed? Sure. If you had really strategized around what you need, what versus what finance needs versus what operations needs, and then arrived at the conclusion that best of breed is what's best for you, that's a great case to be made for that. But from the outset, it was product first. We need X product because we are HR, um, and we rule. We don't want to mess with what finance wants. They can wait. And that was not a really good approach. And it didn't last long. That person left the organization pretty soon. Um, so how do you consolidate? You can only consolidate based on organizational outcomes. Um, there's some great products out there for HRIS, great products out there for financial ERP, And there are products that do it all, or at least claim to, right? So which one you pick really, really, really depends on how you want to run your operations. And sometimes there is no consensus. Someone has to make a decision, right? And you cannot do these projects by committee. Of course, you need steering committees and governance teams. But when it comes to decision making, there needs to be somebody on the client side, executive sponsor, someone that has the authority that everyone agrees they have to make decisions on you know tiebreaker decisions like this. Okay. Uh, Here's a few questions that I got from a city council member. Obviously, will not name with city council, but um, the question that stuck out was, I've heard horror stories about systems getting turned on and nothing working. How do we avoid becoming one of those cities? Systems getting turned on and nothing working. So I'm assuming that this council member is not very technical, as most aren't, as they shouldn't be. They don't need to be. Um, this goes back to how you define success. So system being turned on, but nothing works. What that tells me is that you bought someone else's definition of turned on. What that tells me is that go live was defined by someone else for you. And nothing works means you're still doing business in your older systems. You're doing business in Excel on paper while you're paying for this nice, shiny thing with a big sticker. Um, that doesn't work for you.